Hey, good morning. Welcome to the 7 a.m. grind. Today is Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. And before I took a break from the grind, we were going through the book of Daniel, just going basically verse by verse or chapter by chapter through the book of Daniel. So I'm going to pick up. I'm going to recap. We covered the first three chapters, and so today we're going to recap those first three chapters really briefly, and then tomorrow we're going to move on into chapter 4. But Daniel's life was amazing. In chapter 1, we find where King Nebuchadnezzar had came and sacked the southern kingdom. You'll remember Israel was broken down into two areas. You had the northern kingdom, which housed 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel, and then the southern kingdom, which had the other two tribes of Israel, and that's where Jerusalem was. It was called Judah. And God had told them to obey him and trust him, and they didn't do it as a nation. The southern kingdom disobeyed God. They decided not to trust God. And God takes it seriously when we choose not to trust him. Because when we don't trust God, that means we're trusting in something else. So God allowed an empire to rise up under the leadership of King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, and they sacked Judah and they took it over. And what we learn from that is when a nation doesn't trust God, God allows us to have leaders that we don't want. And God handed the southern kingdom, God handed Judah into the hands of the King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. But when that happened, King Nebuchadnezzar took into exile the young, the best and the brightest of Jerusalem. He took and moved them over to Babylonian Empire. He took them into captivity. And among those people that were taken was a guy named Daniel and his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were taken into the Babylonian Empire. And that's when they started the indoctrination. The Bible tells us that they indoctrinated them for 3 years. The king stood up and said, hey, if you're going to eat, you're going to eat my food. I'm going to provide you with food. I'm going to provide you with wine. I'm going to provide you with everything you need to have life. And we're going to indoctrinate you. Again, another way to change a nation is you isolate people from their ability to worship in community. You make them dependent upon the government for their food and their way of life. And then eventually they even changed their names. The King Nebuchadnezzar changed their names from Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I think those are familiar names for you. But Daniel remained faithful. He resolved, the Bible says, he resolved not to defile himself with the king's food. And so he told the king and his king's men, he said, me and my friend Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we're going to not eat your food. We're going to eat our own food. And it turns out that they were healthier than all the other captives that they were brought into the Babylonian Empire. So that's kind of where chapter 1 ends. And then we get into chapter 2, and King Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. And he has a dream, and he doesn't know what it means, but it scares him. So he gets all of his people together, all of his wise men, all the Chaldeans, all the enchanters and the sorcerers. And he says, hey, I need someone to interpret this dream for me. But I'm not going to tell you the dream. I want you to tell me the dream I had and then tell me the meaning of it. And all the enchanters and sorcerers and the wise men were like, that is ridiculous. There's not a person alive who could tell you what you dreamed and then come back and interpret it. Tell us your dream and we'll tell you what it means. And King Nebuchadnezzar got mad. He's like, no, I want to find someone who can tell me my dream. Well, his people are like, this can't happen. It's not a thing. And he got angry. He's like, go to all the wise men, which now included Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. Go get all the wise men, bulldoze down their houses, and kill them because none of you can tell me my dream. So the captain of the king's guard, a guy named Arioch, went and found Daniel. And he's like, Daniel, I've got to kill y'all. So get in the truck. We're going to go over the hill. And I've got to kill you guys because no one is able to tell King Nebuchadnezzar what he dreamed and what it meant. And Daniel replied in Daniel 2:14. Look at Daniel's reply. He said, then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. We learned from Daniel's life that he replies with prudence and discretion. And we talked about how do you handle conflict back a couple months ago when we went through this. How do you relate with people that you fundamentally disagree with, or the people that fundamentally disagree with you? Do we bring more heat, or do we bring more light to the argument? Are we full of compassion but mercifully strong and set in our convictions? But do we have prudence and discretion. Well, Daniel asked for a meeting with the king. He said, go schedule a meeting with the king and I'll meet with him. Then Daniel turned to his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he said, pray that the things known to God will be made known to me. And we talked about who do you have in your life that knows how to move the heart of God through prayer? Not people who'll just pray for you when you're sick, but do you have a group of people? Do you have a person or a community of people who know how to move the heart of God, so when you need God to give you what is his, you can turn to those people and they will pray for you. And then Daniel prayed. It's a beautiful prayer in the second chapter of Daniel where Daniel prayed and asked God to give him what is his. And I made the statement back when we did this a couple months ago that what we believe about God is most on display in our prayers. Because most of our prayers are, God, thank you for this, forgive me for this, and give me this. It's thank you, give me, and forgive me. And that really limits what we believe about God. But when you read and you study Daniel's prayer, Daniel knew how to pray in a way that moved the heart of God. Daniel knew how to pray in a way where God wanted to give Daniel what was his. And it's an amazing prayer, so we talked about that. Well, obviously, God revealed the dream to Daniel. Daniel went in and interpreted it to King Nebuchadnezzar. And he sat down with the king's like, this is what you dreamed, and this is what it meant. Nebuchadnezzar was so blown away by the God of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that King Nebuchadnezzar promoted Daniel to be the leader over the Babylonian Empire, one of the leaders of the Babylonian Empire, but Daniel didn't do it. Daniel said, I don't want that position. Why don't you promote my friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and make them leaders in the Babylonian Empire? Which is another challenge. Are we living in our life in a way that promotes other people? Are we all about getting the glory ourselves? It's amazing what can happen for God when no one cares who gets the glory. Do we live our lives in a way to where other people are promoted? And then we get into chapter 3. A very familiar chapters where King Nebuchadnezzar made this image of gold. And he said, when you hear the sound of the harp and the flute and the lyre in the back, and all the instruments, you need to bow down and worship this image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. I think it says like 8 or 9 times in that passage that King Nebuchadnezzar set it up. King Nebuchadnezzar set it up. Ultimately, this is a response to the dream that Daniel interpreted for him. And he was afraid his kingdom was actually going to fall, which it does. But he set up this image of gold for people to worship. And of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they did not bow. They would not worship. So the king came back to them. The king had him brought to them and said, hey, I'm going to tell you one more time. If you do not bow and worship this idol I set up, then you'll be thrown into the fiery furnace, which is a great reminder that the culture will always give us a second chance to disobey God. The culture won't stop at our first stand. They will always come back for more and more. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said to the king, they said, we don't need to answer you in this matter. They understood that they answered to the authority, God. And so King Nebuchadnezzar did it. He threw him into the fiery furnace, had it turned up 7 times hotter than it ever was. And then, you know the story, he went in and he looked into the furnace and he's like, hey, didn't we throw 3 people in there? But I see 4 men walking around and one looks like the Son of God. And of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were delivered out of the fiery furnace. And King Nebuchadnezzar said, look, I'm going to add your God to the pantheon of my other gods. And he said, no one can talk bad about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Excuse me. And that's where chapter 3 ends. So tomorrow, new stuff. We'll pick up in chapter 4. King Nebuchadnezzar has another dream. It's an amazing story. So I'll see you tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Y'all have a great day. Love you. I'm out.